Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Entrepreneurial Mindset and the question, where do ideas come from? How do I generate an idea? That's the first question actually entrepreneurs have. I would like to found a startup, but I have no idea. Does that sound familiar to you? Well, on the one hand, it might. On the other hand, you might also have faced such situation like this one. A social network for university as an example. So it's graduation day. You're finished with college, you're finished with university, whatever, many of you will move into different countries, but you do have a lot of friends and you like to stay in contact. And those quotes are very typical, like, I'll miss you guys so much, such a pity that we won't see each other anymore. And yes, I would love to know what everyone is up to, so I would like to follow up. Why isn't there a platform for us to keep track of each other? This shouldn't be too hard, is it? So typical quotes people do after graduation, and you'll get to know that too. And this is to some extent a problem statement. People do have the problem to stay in contact. I mean, nowadays there's Facebook out there, so imagine there wasn't Facebook out there. So at that situation, people thought, well, I'd like to stay in contact, and I do have the problem that it is hard to do if it's only via email, and I can't keep track on pictures and all sorts of things. So there's a solution for that. You all know that solution. Let's take the second example, and this could also happen after graduation. Philip actually graduated and is about to start his backpacking trip to Australia. So he packs everything and he tries to lift his backpack, and it's really heavy. He can barely do that. I mean, that's not a good idea if you want to walk around with that. However, that's a different question. So he arrives at the airport, and the service agent typically says something like this: sorry, sir, your luggage is far too heavy. You have to pay additional 50 euros per kilogram. And 50 per kilogram means that's more than 300 euros on top. That's not true. I can't afford that. So Philip is also at this kind of situation where he has a problem statement, standing there and thinking, isn't it a good idea to have a backpack delivery? And again, he faces a problem, he thinks about a solution for that. And that's very typical actually for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs normally start looking around and looking for problems they might tackle. So they wake up, they open their eyes, and with those open eyes, they walk around the entire day in order to look for problems they might able to solve. And this is the approach of serving a need, solving a problem, actually getting to the pain of the customers. And many, well, I would say most of the startups start like this. Actually, I would say more than 90% of the startups start with the problem. I think Vineyard Koshler said that once: if there's no problem, there's no company. So let's do that as the first step. Walk around, look around what bothers you in your life, and think about solutions. And actually, if you think about some entrepreneurs, they do it constantly. Every day they walk around, they look at what happens there, what works good and what doesn't work out, and is there a different solution to that? Is it possible to solve that problem in a different way? Is there a problem actually existing? And this is an interesting discussion, by the way, the pain or gain discussion, because there's a different approach also to entrepreneurial ideas and entrepreneurial opportunities, creating a need. So if you think about a Tamagotchi, for example, I don't know if there's a good problem statement. Maybe you can construct a problem statement on a Tamagotchi, but I guess it is more something people didn't know and people wanted to have when it happened to occur on the market, which is the gain discussion. So you can also create a need. And this is constantly like the question, what is better to do? However, if I do look at really good companies nowadays, and I'd like to give you the example of Vermietet.de, which is a German company, but these companies go the following way, where the example of Vermietet.de really fits in. Vermietet.de was looking into the market of private landlords in Germany. And actually what happens is that private landlords face high administrative efforts for their assets in Germany. So there's lots of people who own a house or own a flat and not living there by themselves, but renting that out to other people. Especially in Germany, this market really exists. And it's a pain for those landlords to collect the rent and to do all the administration around that renting house. And actually, the founders of Vermietet.de, they had the idea to create a platform to facilitate these rentals. Actually, the guy who started that first had that problem within his family, and this is how he saw that this is really a problem. And he tried to understand that problem, and then he tried to bring up a really good solution for that problem. However, he has also a gain perspective in mind, and that's really interesting because this gain perspective is actually the big vision he could step in order to make it a real interesting, great company. Because what you do is, if you solve that pain, you have access to all the bills a landlord has to pay. And this is how you know what the landlord actually does and where he gets his electricity from, also the power, and where it gets gas from, and all the other things, insurances and so on. So what you could do is you could create the gain that you leverage the rental document access to create transparency and asset performance, and actually not only do an automated administration process, but also you could step into delivering other kind of contracts on a yearly basis. You can get a commission for that. So if you change the power contract to a cheaper one, you get a commission from the new one, and so on. Which is an interesting market in order to serve that need of people would like to have cheaper contracts. And this is the gain actually he could run in, and this is why Vermietet.de is an interesting example of starting serving a need, looking at the pain of a customer, and out of a very well-defined problem statement, out of that kind of niche, going into a much larger market where you can create a need and actually expand your company through gain of customers and scale that up. So to sum it all up, the first step for many entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs, is looking at problem statements. And remember Vineyard Kaufler. And if you found a problem statement, look for the solution, and we're going to get to that next. But if you'd like to build a real large visionary company, then your company probably is the one that creates a need, and by thus is really expanding. And think about the social communities. Think about how Facebook started. Actually serving a need of putting the Harvard students together in a better process compared to a physical Facebook. However, look how it expanded today, and look at actually the gain of the customers, the need that Facebook created. Nobody thought about that people will do these things they do on Facebook nowadays, but they do it. And that's the interesting second step. But first of all, let's stick to the question of look at a problem, try to solve that problem, and how to get further with that. This is coming up next.